I've had my first detractors on my videos in the comments sections, which means I must be getting large enough to get some views from theists. For the most part, these people are fairly polite. However, they use these two arguments which I would like to address. The arguments they use are that God is love, and it's obvious that the world was created. Just look outside at that design. Oh boy. For those with children in the room, I may recommend watching this one alone. It will get graphic in description. There are two types of religious people. One, the type who are in desperate situations who use it to grasp onto the slightest hope and love. And two, privileged and protected people who follow it because it feels good and makes them feel safe and loved. Now, you may not consider yourself in either group, and if you don't, then you're in group 2. You're probably living a Western lifestyle. That means you're privileged, which means you aren't one of the 3 billion people on this planet struggling to get by on less than $2 a day. Yes, it appears planned at first glance, and that's because our brains work to find patterns even if they aren't there, as it is more dangerous to not spot a pattern that is there than to believe there are patterns that aren't there. Upon further inspections of nature, we see a God who made prey very good at running and predator who is very good at killing. The predator-prey relationship is a fight to the death of either evisceration or starvation, both being horrible deaths. These occur on a daily basis. From a scientific viewpoint, it is beautiful and a natural occurrence, but from the view of either animal, it is a desperate and horrifying experience, full of fear and agony to the loser. Any deity who allows this kind of horrendous death and suffering on a daily basis is either sick and cruel or incompetent. A manus offers himself to a mate as food as a way to distract her and pass on his genes. Certain worms pass on their genes by boring themselves into the eyes of baby lambs. This is their only means of passing on their genes and their entire purpose for living. Children starve to death daily, while people think they see Mary's face in toasts. People's view of the world is so limited and protected, especially in America. Death is something you rarely see. I find it interesting that among so many scientists, some of the top atheists are illusionists like Penn and Teller and the amazing James Randi, as they are fully aware of how easily the human mind is fooled into experiencing or seeing something they actually haven't. Some of the top con men are also illusionists, as they induce these feelings on others. Okay, let's say that God has given us free will. For what purpose and why is it such a wonderful gift? Western peoples are so protected from the horrors that the majority of the world has to face. 5,000 children are orphaned daily. Over 27 million people are in slavery, many of which are sexual slavery, which is more than before the U.S. abolition. Starvation, one of the most horrible deaths in the world, happens to 15 million children a year. In the U.S. alone, 1.3 women are raped every minute. This statistics is 20 times higher in Japan, the second richest country in the world, and I don't even want to estimate the number of unreported occurrences that occur in third world nations. Most of the times they are not reported in these nations because they go to the police. They're more likely to get raped by the police as well, especially if they're minorities. I don't see how that is a choice or free will, especially since we're finding out more and more that an education in psychotherapy correlates with less crime, poverty, and addiction. If God really gave us free will, He would have educated us, or at least left us a guide on how our bodies and minds worked, instead of requiring us to stumble around through a trial and error. Free will does not exist if you're not given the facts. A used car salesman uses this tactic all the time, as he will only tell you half-truths, and then tell you that the choice is up to you. Had Adam had all the facts, there is no way he would have rebelled. To someone like him who was immortal, according to the Bible at least, the very idea of death was inconceivable. Protected people see wonder in the world, but not from a mindset of understanding, but from naivety and poor understanding. The setup we humans live in today, at least in the Western world, is not natural. It's not even close to natural. I hear so many people saying, look out your window and look at the beauty. How can you say that God didn't make that? Well, that's just it. He didn't. We crafted a lot of landscaping you see. And a lot of the areas you see on nature shows like rainforests are areas most naive Americans wouldn't last more than a few days in, with all the things that can kill them. The earth is deadly. Beautiful, but deadly. The earth is an equal mix of life and death. Science, however, has allowed us to live where life is the norm and death is the rarity. We don't even have to kill the tons of animals we eat every day. That part of death is isolated from us. Having large families was required until the 20th century because 2 to 3 out of every 5 children was going to die of some horrible disease, especially smallpox. Death was as common as births, and it still is in impoverished countries that don't have adequate drinking water and food. Parents didn't even get attached to their children until a certain age because they had to wait for the child to survive through all the diseases they were going to have. Until the 1950s, children were looked on as an extra labor machine, especially during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Anyone who doesn't come to me as a little child will not enter the kingdom of God. Many people are caught up by this idea. Movies and kids shows idealize being a child as being better than being an adult, and children have the ability to believe things that adults can't, especially in the case of Santa Claus. If you want to see what a wonderful world God has made, go to Africa without any luggage and try to get by there, where famine, disease, and suffering is just as common as birth. This is an area where guerrilla fighters will come rape you in front of your husband and give you AIDS, after which you'll be shunned by your family and villages. Or you can look outside your air-conditioned home with flushing toilets, drinkable water, easy access to food, computers, no worries about non-genetic childhood diseases, and appreciate all that science has done. When we look at nature in these times, we do so as a privilege for our scientific achievements, and not anything a deity or religion has given us. God has not blessed America. Science and reason have blessed America because we used to embrace them. During the beginning of the smallpox vaccination movement, there were anti-vaxxers too. These Christian people believed that smallpox and other diseases were part of God's divine plan and we shouldn't be messing in God's domain. The Hindu goddess of smallpox is now the Hindu goddess of monkeypox because these people feared that she would rain down her wrath on them if they got vaccinated. Until Kinsey did his studies, child molestation was not taken very seriously at all, and definitely not nearly as much as it is now, because while it seems obvious to us now, people were unaware of the long-term emotional impact that molestation can have on a child. So no, I don't believe that a loving God made the universe, nor was it designed. If a deity did make this universe, he is one sick bastard who basks in our suffering, because apparently our distant ancestors ate an apple when they weren't even given the knowledge of good and evil. He heaps suffering and plagues on humans and requires animals to kill each other on a daily basis to survive when they did nothing to incur God's wrath. As a microbiologist, I could spend the rest of my YouTube career focusing on the horrible suffering in the world that most of you people are completely oblivious to. But that would only cause destructive despair to myself and my viewers. There's no reason for this. I'd rather work on doing things that are positive and can advance us. No one talks about these things, which is why I have to bring it up. If this was a plan by a divine deity, that all this suffering was worth the plan, especially when the majority are going to burn in hell for eternity, I would prefer that God had not made the universe than force us to live through this. I would prefer the more logical approach that all suffering in the world is a natural process. It's completely indifferent to us because suffering occurs on the just and on the unjust alike. This is a process that we may someday as a species rise above, as opposed to a bloodthirsty God who made this and requires us to ignore science in place of faith that he has a plan. I think we need a plan of our own instead of waiting around for his. The best way to do this is to focus and learn from data without confirmation bias, and then come up with ways for us to live our lives, as opposed to what some ancient people in a Bronze Age era with no understanding of psychology, germ theory, or anything involving the human body came up with. I think we can do better, because God, if he does exist, is definitely not love.